again, a very impressive list of group of attendees. Thank you all for joining. So Ray, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing and I'll let you take it over. Okay.
Terrific, Tony. Thank you. Well, once you stop sharing, let me open up one more time. Let me get the presentation set up. All right. Are you, Tony, able to see the screen?
Looks good. Looks good.
All right, let's get going. So again, welcome everybody. I appreciate you investing an hour of your time with us. The intention today is a industry update, so it's a non-selling event. What we want to do is really share our experiences around what people are doing today, and both Adam and I are going to be contributing there. So let's first start off with Adam. Can you give us just kind of a brief overview of who Celonis is?
Yep. So, and let me start with a quick intro of myself as well. So I head up customer success at Celonis. That's such a buzzworthy term. Let me just distill it down to ultimately it's my and my team's responsibilities to make sure that value and ROI is delivered off our solutions. I started my career supply chain optimization from a management consulting standpoint, jumped to spend analytics with a procurement software group, and then have been at Celonis for a little while since. So Celonis, the 30-second story, and you can see some numbers. We're really pleased and excited about our trajectory and growth pattern over the last several years. We started, if you think about sticky notes on a board in a room, that is process mapping. We digitize that by pulling that information, event logs, straight out of source systems. So Celonis is an intelligent layer that sits over any ERP, Marketo, Salesforce, CRM tools, a number of other variety point solutions, and we extract all of that event log data to create a visualization of that process flow. In recent years, we've evolved from that visualization to a very strong execution engine. And that's really where we're going to spend a lot of our time talking today. So Ray, thank you. Tony, thank you. And maybe my last point before, Ray, I hand it off to you. In previous sessions, the more questions that come from the audience, the more interactive, the stronger and I think more engaging this is. So Ray and I are going to pause and pose a number of questions throughout this 45 minutes. We welcome you to whatever degree you're comfortable to fire away. All right, thank you, Ray.
Thank you, Adam. Hey, so a little bit about A2K. So first of all, I'm Ray Wolf. I'm Chief Executive Officer of the company. We are a Texas-based company delivering solutions across North America. And what the focus of our company is really around translating technology into business outcomes. And so that gives us a broad leeway to work with various partners. However, through a selection process, we have partnered with Celonis around process mining and candidly around execution management because we believe it's best in breed. Things that we focus on is really redesigning the way people work. And another term is how they get stuff done inside the organization, looking across people, process, and technology, looking to automate out the low value and mundane tasks, eliminating variation. And from a system level thinking perspective, I like to call it orchestration, right? The next big gain in what we're doing with technology and working with companies is reducing variation and orchestrating across multiple systems how we're getting stuff done. And of course, as part of that, we're in the cloud. We are a mobile first company. And a key piece of that is really human capital strategy and management, because a lot of this work gets done integrated with the people side of it. So one item on here, and we've talked about it again, is our experience with these webinars is you have your own specific situations that you're facing, and the challenges are, while there's some common threads, they're a little unique. If you care to ask a question where you don't doesn't get attributed to your company, please send a in the chat room to Brian or directly to his email, and we'll answer it. We've dubbed this the future of process. Really, how do you seize the opportunity as we go forward? I think this is one of the most important things business leaders need to be looking at. And in the context of what's going on around us, what we want to do today is share what leaders are doing for their organization to make sure that they come out of this crisis better than when they went in. And yes, coming out of this better, not at status quo or not having to give up any progress. The term VUCA certainly applies here. First time I saw this term going back a number of years was in executive education. And, you get the concept. What has happened to us here in the last 6-9 months is that we're really living this. There are a lot of unseen forces and disruptions coming in. Now, as business people, we're used to stuff coming up that we didn't expect, and we deal with it, and pretty agile. A lot of that comes from the business sector, from a competitor. Here we have one that's coming obviously from the healthcare side of it. And in the future, I'm sure we're going to face more things, and we don't even know where it's going to come from just yet. A mentor of mine once shared with me and said, "You know what, Ray, you need to wake up. If you're in a leadership position, wake up every day paranoid that there's somewhere someone is inventing or doing something that will disrupt your business. So you always need to be innovating and creating options and positioning your company for the future so that if one path gets shut down, you could shift to another." So I want to suggest right here up front that although we're going through this crisis and there's a lot of difficulty at a personal and professional level, there's also an opportunity here. And we could innovate and ensure that we come out better than how we went in. From a speed of transformation, the consensus among the people that we're talking with and our clients is that every 3 months, we're going through the equivalent of about 15 years of change. And, that's extremely fast. And the change has evolved. What went on from March to May is different than what's going on from September to the end of the year. However, we have a speed of change that's going on. The good news here is you could harness that to make a jump in your own industry or organization. The other is that someone else in your vertical could do the same. So that's why there's an imperative to move forward. Some research that we did initially going into the crisis, we thought that it was going to be limited to hospitality, retail, and maybe the airline industry. Well, no surprise, we live in an interconnected economy. Every vertical has been impacted, from operations to supply chain and revenue, right? So it's really important for us to start looking and borrowing from other industries in terms of what they're doing. And that's what Adam and I want to do today, is we're going to share with you what our customers are doing, largely in stealth mode. Before we jump into that, Adam, I know you're working quite a bit with your customer base. What are you seeing in terms of the challenges to get to the new normal?
Yep, good question. Loaded question. It's a big answer. So I think let me address it like this. So digital transformation for the last number of years has been part of the conversation. What we've all felt over the last 6, 7, 8 months is a huge acceleration for the need to transform in order for us to really respond, adapt, and continue to thrive. So, looking at this slide, depending upon that industry wheel you showed, there are different high and low points for each group. What comes to mind, and I would say is 3 of the most consistent themes are, the first 2 on here, supply chain management. I think about some of our groups. Kimberly Clark is one of our customers. When COVID truly hit and demand for a lot of their, Kleenex, toiletries, etc., just went through the roof, they've actually used Celonis to manage a daily situation room so that they could always make sure that they're pulling and turning the dials appropriately to make sure on-time delivery is where it needs to be with that higher demand. I'm really pleased to say over this last 6 months, they've actually seen an increase percentage-wise of on-time delivery, and that's through automation and eliminating some variances. Obviously, cash is king. The collection process, looking at payment behaviors on how to pay, obviously that's huge. And then the third point that I want to mention that's not necessarily on this slide is really that human factor. And I know you're going to get into that here over the next few slides. But if you think about how we're deploying the humans in our organizations, number one, are they involved with the most strategic, most impactful activities? How can we help that be the case? And if you think about that statement, that's not only good for the employee, but that's also good for the business. So we'll continue, but that's what hits me off the cuff, Ray.
Awesome. Now that's great insight in terms of what's going on. And I know, Adam, as we get into it, you'll have some specific prescriptive approaches to how to address these. Before we look and see what people are doing, a great source of information is the past. I met Ryan Holiday, who's one of my new favorite authors, and who provides insights into the future. And I asked him, how is it that you can look into a crystal ball? He's like, Ray, I just simply look at history. I see the patterns and I apply it to what's going on right now in the world. And his book, The Obstacle is a Way, offers some good insight. And there were a number of learnings that came out of that I wanted to share from the past. And when I say the past, this is going back to Roman times and pretty far as opposed to just modern times. So the first one is leaders chose to flip the script and not be a victim, right? Things happened to them that they didn't plan for, unexpected in a lot of different ways, whether it was famine or political or economic situations. But they essentially said, I'm not going to be a victim to this. I'm going to turn this around and I'm going to use this crisis to define me as a leader. The other one was go through the obstacle as opposed to spend a lot of time going around it. And the thought process there is that as you go through the obstacle, you develop resiliency. And the resiliency is key for the next crisis that comes up. And that same thing applies here today is, okay, we have the remote work and we're figuring out how to augment technology, and we have cash preservation and we have security challenges with working off the network, right? Once we figure this out, right, it better prepares us to deal with what will come in the future. These leaders also lacked any master plan. So some notion that they had this great playbook ready to go for everything that came at them is just not the case. And same thing happens for us. We all do planning, whether it's 3 months, 6 months, or a 5-year plan. We don't necessarily have the foresight to everything that could happen in the combinations that they do. But in terms of trying to move forward, the recommendation was, and the learning is, start anyhow, anywhere. Just get moving. Many of the clients that we worked with didn't have a plan. They didn't have business continuity on the roadmap. And they had some old playbooks, but they didn't have anything that looked at digital transformation and taking advantage of artificial intelligence, which is the latest tool set. And then lastly, which is my favorite, is that we all need to act the way we want it to be, not the way it is. And that those four become the shortest path into the future. Some stats. We've been researching this for a while. We have some more insights to share. But during the last 3 modern downturns in the economy, 88% of the jobs that were lost were made up through automation. So not that all those positions were, those individuals did not get a job back, but they got a job back doing something else. It was the repetitive, low-value tasks that they automated out. And this was really the key to driving to the future and was the foundation for the innovation. Now, we also see in my conversations with our customers, start in a very traditional place, which is thinking that I can cost cut my way into the future, as the sole playbook, right? It's an element of it, but it needs to be part of a comprehensive plan. Headcount alone as well. The key there is that we will always, in any circumstance, whether we're growing and we can't find talent, or whether we're trying to right size because we have a lot of uncertainty, we're going to need to do more with less. And keep that in mind as we move into the next few slides. And then the other term I want to introduce here is a winner, winners and losers. Now, sometimes we don't like to make those stark contrasts, but there are businesses that will go under or be assumed. In the last 3 downturns, 18% of the businesses were assumed or went out of business. Like, real stuff happened to them that wasn't positive. Right? So we need to be thinking about how do we evolve and adapt. The U.S. Air Force was a large customer of mine in the past, and a general there once told me, as we were going through making some changes there, that if you don't like change, you're going to like irrelevance even less. So get started somehow, some way. Hey, with that, we want to find out what you all are doing. So let's do a poll. Tony, if you could put that up. So the question is, what are you in process of implementing, or what are you considering implementing in the next 6 months? Please select all that apply. You could select more than one. I will tell you, as the results are coming in, as we have spoken and delivered this presentation to other parts of the country, the results do vary geography-wise. It also varies by the position people have in the organization, and we'll share those comments. All right, Tony, why don't we lock those results in? So a couple things that stand out here. The average response on the reduction in headcount, up until today has been 32%. So the fact that we're at 50%, right, having to do more with less is really important. The increased productivity is about in line. And I think, going back to when we started these webinars, I thought that would be around 25%. And I'll just say the thinking at that point is not everybody was thinking productivity just yet. I will tell you, in March, the results were lower than they are now in October. So that's really an evolution. The one where you all accelerate is in the process optimization. So that number has been around 70%. So the fact that 86% are considering that are great. Tony, I'm going to move on from here. So I'm going to close the poll. Thank you. All right, now let's talk about the opportunity and go back to the stats. And this is where it requires additional evaluation. Last 3 downturns, 20% of companies that were in the bottom 20%, you can actually say they're mediocre companies that were treading water, emerged out of the crisis and the downturn in the top 20%. Like, how does that happen? Like, what are they doing differently? Right? And that's where we have been spending our time. So maybe not going back as far as history as Ryan Holiday did, but we're looking in modern times. How do you go from the bottom 20% to the top 20%? There has to be something they did differently. And where they found the productivity gains and the assets to be able to go work on more important things to the business was by focusing on freeing up time and energy and making sure they were working on the right things. So in other words, they got really clear on what was important, and they deprioritized everything else, and they focused on those 2 or 3 things that they needed to get done. The two that are the common threads have been upskilling and automating. So they brought new talent into the organization, which enabled them to deliver products and services or new experiences. And they also automated across the board. Now, the tools that were available to us back 20, 30, 50 years for upskilling and automation were different than what we had today. Once upon a time, Excel was automation. And now we have the power of artificial intelligence and graphic processor units that are put out. So this is the most current playbook, the two executions that people are working with. So now let's take a little more time and get prescriptive on what's it going to take to thrive in the next 3 months. And I crossed out 6 because we've been at this for a while and the time is shorter and we do need to get moving. Next 4 slides, in my opinion, are the money slides. I've been applying this approach now for the last 15 years across a number of businesses globally, a number of verticals, but the great equalizer is time and energy. So if you look at your human capital assets, you have a set amount of time every day. You could break our time and energy up into 4 buckets: survival, functional, operational, and transformational. The surveys that we have conducted for the last few years has shown that 90% of the effort, time, and energy is on the past and 10% on the future. And this is not limited to individual contributors. This is also on the leadership team. I originally thought that it would be skewed by individual contributors and not the leaders. And in terms of the categories, on the left-hand side, at best, you're maintaining. On the right-hand side, operational and transformational, you'll have linear and exponential growth. Carol Dweck wrote a book called Mindset, and she does a really good job of bringing analytics forward on how to apply the growth mindset in a business setting, in an organization setting, and even in your personal lives if you're raising children. But what we're looking to do here is move from a fixed mindset or a scarcity mindset to a growth and abundance mindset. And, you ask, how do we do that? Well, first of all, the target needs to be about 60%. So you need to shift about 60 percentage points from the past and on to the future. And the way that people are doing this today is they're obsoleting things that they're doing. They're delegating either inside or outside the organization, and they're automating the low value tasks that should just be put into memory muscle. So lots of opportunities. And that's one of the reasons why we partnered with Celonis, because they have an awesome approach to doing this and bringing clarity to what has to happen. So freeing up time and energy to work on things that matter most is the play that you want to be running. Now, as we seize the opportunity, 1, keep in mind that the people that are doing this are doing it in stealth mode. There aren't going to be any press releases, not a lot of noise. They're going to be transforming the processes that are going on, let's say quote to cash internally. They're going to be transforming the employee experience, the customer experience, doing it rather quickly, and bringing their own version of Amazon to their vertical where they'll be in the position to disrupt. And again, the playbook is work redesign, automation, and productivity. Now, we have the playbook. We need to continue to remind ourselves, though, that there's people involved here. It's people and process and technology and how they work together. And the people, we're facing some unique challenges of working remote, off the network, without a lot of face-to-face collaboration. We're teaching our kids at home and many other challenges that come up. So we need to keep that in mind. And then on the business level, there's also a similar dilemma. And that's where I want to turn it over to Adam now to start talking about what he's seeing in terms of the dilemma at the business level, and then prescriptively how they're using Celonis to work into the future.
Yep. No, that's perfect, Ray. And thank you for the setup. So if I take a step back and really define the problem we're talking about here. So if you think about your enterprise, your organization, there was a time where, hey, we have a process for that, was used synonymously with we are effective, we are efficient, or our intent is to be effective, efficient. The dilemma is if you think about all of those different processes across the end-to-end flows and systems, there are lots of breakdowns. There are lots of people who have institutional knowledge that have created a new variation, a new opportunity of how to get things done. The intent of Celonis, at the end of the day, we believe there is a lot of capacity that is hidden and locked within each of the organizations. And our goal, our reason for being, is to unlock that execution capacity. So Ray, if you flip the slide, please. There are lots of dollars being spent. And again, I'm not going to summarize or speak point by point through this slide, but there is a lot of energy, a lot of time, a lot of dollars being spent on best of breed point solutions. The Celonis approach, because our belief is a number of fragmented systems will not cure or unlock that execution capacity. Our goal is to be the intelligent layer on top of all these different source systems so that some of these numbers here can actually be realized. And Ray, let me talk about how we do that if you flip to the next slide. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit and show you what I'll call a mock demo through some screenshots of the procure to pay, order to see process. You see here just a very quick visual of some of the systems that might be involved at various points in that process flow. If you flip that, and I'm going to probably just accelerate here, Ray, to the screenshot. So if you flip one more time, if you would. Okay, let me talk about how we do this. So there are three key elements, and this is very much an iterative process as we work our way across the landscape of an organization. We pick one domain. So let's talk P2P to start. When I was making those comments about how Celonis is layered onto certain source systems, we do that and we provide real-time connections through, we at this point have probably about, we're approaching 90 pre-built connectors to any of these source systems that we frequently see. That doesn't mean we don't connect to legacy homegrown systems, but we just have already pre-built connectors. The reason that's important is I think about some of the ERP implementations and some other software experiences I've had in the past. We are talking you are up and running and validating that data within 24 hours because of that pre-built connector. The end game with that real data is to build something that looks like what we're looking at now. So let me speak and just orient everyone's eyes to what we actually see. So we are tracing POs in this flow. You see how many different POs, those are the cases we're tracking, are flowing through the system. At the top there, 1.12 million. You see the net order value that those POs represent. And then on the right-hand side, if you look all the way at the bottom, and where you start seeing those deviations from that main highlighted blue line, you see we are right now viewing 6 of the, I can't even see, what's that, 655 potential variations. So in this example, and obviously names and faces are removed to protect everyone, this is a real life example. And really the question I would pose to you all, think about some of your processes. Think about how many different variations probably exist today. This is what we expose and bring to light. We do this by pulling out actually what has happened out of those event logs. So, Ray, if you would go to the next step. After we're able to know and validate the reality based off the data, we start talking about 2 other quite powerful, impactful elements. Secondly, we talk about how do we sense and start to baseline today's performance versus where we want to be. So you can see right here what we refer to as the steering board, excuse me, and we're highlighting DPO, days payable outstanding. And what we really intend here with this cockpit is how do we start anticipating proactively problems, and I'll show you how we execute on those in just an example. One other point I wanted to highlight, and this is something that really was a meaningful finding with a customer last week. we were looking at price changes. And there were a number of different variations off their ideal state process flow dealing with price changes. As a result of really the times, the last 6-8 months, they found that there was an excessive amount of price changes where it would occur 2 or more times with a single PO. What that was actually labeled and how that came to appear on the dashboard, that was actually labeled as fire sale behavior. And that fire sale behavior was actually originally viewed as a negative. However, as time went on and we started acting upon that, they looked at what are all the different product lines and inventory and SKUs within their distribution centers. There was an appetite with this particular customer. They were okay with certain SKUs. Let's just clear out the inventory. Let's sell those at a lower price. However, there were certain other elements where that fire sale behavior was absolutely a no-no. So we can get fairly granular where we're talking about price changes, price discrepancies, and really drill down into those behaviors. And that's how we actually execute and move the needle. Ray, if you'd move to that execution piece, which is the last slide. So how do we execute? We act. And really what we're intending to do here, and the example I'll speak to in just a minute, is Vodafone, who is driving that perfect touchless PO rate. We configure an actual workflow from Celonis. Once we intelligently detect what the opportunity is, we can actually tie into different source systems, notify people appropriately, and make sure whether it's your ERP, your CRM, your any core solution you are dependent on, we're able to actually execute some of those behaviors without human intervention. The perfect PO story, that touchless invoice, really adding automation to the equation, that is how we're able to strategically deploy our people and make sure we're maximizing time spent. So let me pause here for a second. I know I just walked pretty quickly through those 3 different elements. And let me turn it either to the audience, Ray, what questions or comments do you maybe have at this point?
We do have one private question. How much is driven by AI or machine learning?
Yeah, so let's be very specific with that question. So we have a machine learning workbench built into the application, and we also have AI. That is really built around the execution elements. And so specifically, Celonis a little while ago actually acquired a company that has what I'll describe as a cutting edge version of RPA, to use just common language. The short answer is both. And actually, let me make sure that I don't go down a rabbit hole too far here.
I think you answer it.
Exactly.
You answered it. All right. There was one other private question. How do you communicate the process optimization to my employees and teams without them worry about losing their jobs?
Yep. Well, it's all about being proactive and having a plan. If we just say, hey, we're going to automate this by this degree, that's going to leave a lot of questions. There are various layers to that question, but it's really our best practice and what we've really deployed across a number of organizations is to be as transparent as possible, being top driven as far as this is what we're going to achieve, and then this is what the new normal will look like. And that per company can mean 100 different things. Good question.
All right, Adam, I'm going to move on to the next slide here.
Yep, perfect. So really in closing with my overview, I highlighted a couple, on-time delivery examples, supply chain management, payment behaviors. Where Celonis is really continuing to grow is across the entire, I'll say, industry wheel. So, supply chain distribution, customer management, order management, obviously finance, admin spaces, and then if we're looking very specifically, product and service lines as well. So with that, there are lots more examples that I'll probably wait to address with specific questions, but that in a nutshell is where Celonis stands. So Ray, I'll turn it back to you.
Adam, let me ask you a question. So, as you bring Celonis, it's a pretty powerful technology. Do you need to go after all of these at the same time? I mean, how do you get started?
Yep, absolutely. So one of the biggest, that's one of the biggest questions we're asked, and I'm a very prescriptive person when it comes to, I do not want to boil the ocean prematurely. That is a recipe to fail. One of the things when you see that process flow and expand out all 655 of those variations and see a gnarly spaghetti diagram, that's a little bit overwhelming. We need to start, and the Celonis team, our partner ecosystem, is very specific with pick 1, 2, 3 use cases, and a use case is defined specifically like that fire sale price change behavior I mentioned earlier. So for an implementation over a 6-week period, we're going to pick 3 of those use cases, bring them live, make sure that we have an execution engine in place to start addressing our performance there, and then we will mature and iterate from that point. Great question.
Do you have one more question from here? Give an example of something you guys have done from the finance perspective.
So let's talk credit blocks. I'm sure you guys were excited to drill into these details. So if we're talking about credit blocks, there are certain customers that have, through time and history, demonstrated that they are paying on time and they're worthy of that credit. There have been a number of customers we find that their automatic behavior is to throw many customers into a default setting, which at the end of the day increases cycle time. And so if you think about that, one of the automated checks we have through our AI and machine learning workbench is to make sure that we're able to, on a case-by-case basis, track that entire history and then give a recommendation to one of those agents, so that if there is a default, we can either notify a human to say, hey, is this really necessary? Or we can, frankly, if given the permission by the company, and once we determine certain thresholds are established, we can eliminate that credit hold in the first place.
Terrific. Adam, why don't you pick a couple of the customer wins? I could talk about the 2 on the bottom, but we'll let you kick it off.
So, it's so hot right now about making sure, product is delivered on time in a effective manner. There's a group we work with, Ascend Performance Materials, and perhaps just like their name, indicates, they create performance materials used in a lot of PPE equipment, the masks everyone's wearing these days. And so obviously demand is quite high. Over the 4-month period during COVID and when things started, we actually saw an on-time flow to the time of shipment increase 27%. And that's by us automating and eliminating 43% of those previous variations. And if you think about that, that was done during the COVID time period. And, I think it was Arthur who mentioned, maybe we're starting to see things begin to normalize or things to resume to pre-COVID levels. If you think about making performance changes like that when times are as tough as they are, when people in operating environments are as lean as they are, think about the opportunity. Think about, again, to use my original language, think about that execution capacity that we're putting in place when times normalize. So it's quite exciting. I do have 3 elements here with some notable savings and success stories with some of these large companies. But Ray, let me turn it to you to talk about your 2 examples.
Yeah. A point that I want to make here is when we use a Celonis engine and then we look to automate out variation, the dividend comes in 2 forms. One, there's a clear financial, and then the second one is in human capital, freeing up time to go do things that are more important. Now, what you do with that time is different, but we have 2 examples down the bottom. Applied Materials, we made adjustment to the non-standard work order process that took it down from 6 weeks down to 6 days to process anything that didn't have a SKU, which was about 1/3 of the order, which resulted in $5 million per month increase in sales. But it also freed up 5 hours per week per employees involved in that process. And in Ingram Micro, $47 billion company, working with them on a sales process, and it happened to be involve credit checks as well. If you think about this large distributor, we're able to free up in less than 12 weeks, 1.5 days per week, right? That's more than 20% of their time. And they coined a term that we're using now. It's called proactivity. So they're translating the available time into doing proactive things such as pursuing new leads, the long tail with existing clients, et cetera. So that's pretty ubiquitous across all sales activity. Well, bringing this all together, so Adam laid out kind of a prescriptive path on how we use your data. We show you the normative process that actually works, the variation and the financial impact. And then we also talked about the time and hour impact for your employees. Well, if you pull this all together, essentially the differentiation you can make with this is by future-proofing your company, building the resilience and taking them into the future. I mean, this alone is sufficient to move you into the top 20% if you're not there already, or to continue to put distance between you and your top competitors, no matter what your organizations are. So real positive situation. Want to end with an offer. There's specifics to your organization that, because of time constraints and because they're unique to your organization, you're not able to share on this venue. Adam and I are happy to do a very tailored session, further educate your organization, and map out, how in a very short amount of time we create an initial time to value. The other that we're offering is an exclusive 100x guarantee. So massive 100x guarantee. Well, what that really means is we will do an assessment of a single process. And if we do not identify a 100x return on that, right, the cost to do the assessment is absolutely free. Now, I'll warn you up front, we've never failed at this because there's tremendous amount of low-hanging fruit, but we will dollarize that for you and essentially give you the ROI ammunition to be able to move forward and implement a Celonis-based solution. And then lastly, really glad to be with you, be here today with you, and talk about the future of process and how people are future-proofing with automation. And again, thank you for your time. Tony, back to you.
Yeah. So since we do have a couple questions, can you go back to the slide that has to do with the mapping of the 7% to 10%? I think there was go back to it was one of your slides.
7 and 10%.
Yeah, right there. There you go. Okay. So can you kind of go into the mindset from a holistic, as far as companies concerned, moving in the same direction, kind of from a DNA and kind of being able to communicate to the employees how important these automation and optimization is important on the process side?
Yeah, so I mean, this is a key element of how you have a successful transformation. You have to get the fingerprints of all the employees on your plans and get their input. And while we talk about AI technology giving us great analysis of data, your employees or freelancers or contracts or individuals in the organization are a great source of understanding of where the inefficiencies are that, if changed, will bring a lot of value. So involve them in that process. Make sure that whatever plan you create, that they see themselves in that plan and can see that they contributed. Why? Because then they make it a success, because there's still learnings that are going to go on. But if you have a bunch of smart guys in a room who analyze everything about the company and then say, guys, we figured it out, this is the path forward, let's all join in, they're going to sit back and watch and then let you go through all the trials. So get them involved. we find amazing aha moments by talking to the employees, and the leaders of the company are like, oh my gosh, didn't realize that that was the current situation.
Okay. Thank you so much. I think this next question is really for Adam. Adam, obviously you're interacting with lots of different clients and customers these days. What are the top 3 things that you've seen that they're working on these days for process optimization?
Yeah. It probably would go back to one of those, maybe slide 8 or 9, where we talk about supply chain management. And if I break that down, that is making sure inventory and material levels are where we need them to be. And if we look at the flip side of following that, manufacturing and distribution activity, how are we getting our end product or our end service into that end user's hand as quickly as possible? So there is a ton of on-time delivery activity, and there is a ton of how do we make sure that cash is in hand as quickly as possible. So from a obviously accounts receivable standpoint, and then if we're looking at accounts payable, I want to maximize working capital. So I need to really look at, are we fully taking advantage of early pay discounts? Are we paying too early if there are not discounts? So we get very granular looking at all the different scenarios, and maybe the springboard of one of the questions that maybe came out twice here, how do we engage our employees? As we're having the conversation about really determining where are the best places to spend our attention and energy, that is not just with the head of a business unit or a manager or a director. That truly is engaging with the entire team. So ultimately, when we do make the decision, again, I'm not going to say that it was a consensus, but there is input from all the key players as far as how do we act.